Good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you again to our Women for the Land Conservation Conversation today. My name is Heather Bacher. I am the state coordinator here in Indiana for the Women for the Land initiative. We're a program of the Indiana Conservation Partnership, and we do have a website and offer programs throughout the year. So I hope you will learn more about our organization and participate in some of our other programs. I'm going to turn it over to Lais McCartney for our presentation and ask her to introduce herself, and we'll get started. Lais?
Thanks so much, Heather, for having me here. Thanks everyone for being here. Like Heather said, my name is Lais McCartney, and I live out here in East Central Indiana, and I'm an A&R, which means Agriculture and Natural Resources Educator in Hancock County, just east of the big city of Indianapolis. And I also get to be the Indiana SARE State Coordinator. SARE is about Sustainable Ag Research and Education, which is one of the resources I will share actually in this presentation, because they have wonderful soil health books that you can get free online as PDFs. So let me know if you have any questions about that. And we're going to talk about putting your garden to bed. I know that it's kind of early in the season to be thinking about this, but hopefully it'll just give you some ideas of what you can do in the fall to prepare for the spring and make it a little bit more beneficial for your soil and your native beneficial insects. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So let's just get started. Can you all see my screen? I guess, Heather, you probably can, I guess, or you would have probably told me already.
Yes, you look good.
Thank you. Awesome. So I wanted to share what we're going to hopefully come away learning here is some ideas of how to improve your soil and habitat. And we heard from a lot of people before we started the recording that you have various types of gardens, but all gardens benefit from improving your soil. So it's a wide range of applications. I would love if you understand soil as a living thing. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how to test your soil and to learn what are healthy indicators of a healthy soil. We'll also learn how to read some soil samples when you send it into a soil lab and see if it's necessary to maybe supplement your soil to get it to be more in balance. We're going to learn about different types of composting, how to use leaf matter. It's my big special interest. Learn some methods to cover your soil, because that's one of the ways to take care of our soil is keep it covered. And also we're going to learn about beneficial insects and where they live over the winter and how they're connected to all these principles as well. The soil food web is pretty big and it's complicated, but it's really all about there's life under the soil that lots of times that are so small that we don't even see them. But there's also large macro animals, like we get to see the earthworms, we get to see the moles and the voles, and sometimes they're annoying, but they're part of the huge soil web. And so we're going to just talk about how the soil is a living thing and the soil food web is connected with all of that. So there's particles obviously in soil, that's sand, clay, and then the organic matter. There's 3 different basic parts, but those microbes that live in the soil, there's so many different types. There's going to be beneficial nematodes. There's so many bacteria, funguses, protozoa, and basically there's a lot of characteristics of a healthy soil. Over here on the right of your screen, it says 600 million bacteria individuals are in 1 gram of soil. So that's a lot of bacteria, and they're different types and they're doing different jobs. There's obviously minerals and microminerals that are found in soil. There's going to be animals, insects, and worms. So a lot of things live under there that we just don't see. This is going to be Kurt. He's going to show us how to take a soil sample. Lots of times in your extension offices close by, your land-grant universities usually have extension offices close, at least regionally, and they may even have a soil probe you can borrow. So this is an idea of something you can use to check your soil. And right now in the fall is the great time to do it, because if you need a supplement, it's good to do it in the fall so that your soil has time to take it in, so that your plants, when you plant them in the spring, can use that supplement if you had to put something in there for the pH. In Indiana, lots of times in central Indiana, we have a very high pH, and we don't want to add lime. You always want to know what your pH is before you do anything to it, because you could actually cause more problems. So I want to show you how to take a soil sample with this probe.
I have my soil probe now. When we take soil samples for turf, we want about the top 6 to 8 inches. So the nice thing about this is I can usually just use my body weight with the probe and pull a soil sample. So what I have here then is a soil sample. Okay. You will see that I have already sampled the other areas. So what I'm going to do now is just deposit this into my sampling bucket. And there I have my soil sample. So it comprises my core, and I would take about a dozen of these. So once we have our soil in here, what we do is we then mix it all up, right? We just mix it all up. Got a rock in there, don't need that. Once I mix that all together, I will put it in a container and send it off to a soil testing lab. So the slice method works like this. We take our spade, or some people will call it the pie method. We take our spade, put it in the ground to a depth of about 6 inches. Again, this is if it's a little wetter, that would work a little bit better. Next thing we do is we wedge this forward, okay? We create either what we call a pie or an area that we can slice. Then we go opposite the area where we just pushed, and we pull out a slice. And right here, we have our slice. Now here's the nice thing. Of course, I've got this kind of gash in my soil. All I have to do is this. Tamp it down. I know when I tell people about going out and they don't have a nice tool and about taking soil samples in the yards, I know they get worried about having 10 or 15 holes in the yards. By doing the slice method, by tamping the ground opposite the direction which you just pulled your sample from, you really can do this without too much damage. I have my soil probe.
Thanks to Kurt. So I want to share that in Indiana, there's a lot of different soil labs, and there probably are a lot of different labs in your state too. So, and they sometimes test different things. So for instance, if you're in an urban area, you may need to find a test that's specifically defined for contaminants in your soil if you are worried about something like that, like maybe if you're in an industrial area. So it will depend. And I would highly recommend reaching out to your local extension office or NRCS or Soil Water Conservation District if you need support on that. But in Indiana, we have a lot of different ones. But in our office, in our extension office, we usually send it to this one place in Fort Wayne. And this is a basic form. And it's about $20 for a homeowner. Now, if it's a farmer and you're getting the less fancy graphics, it's only $10. But you want to tell the soil testers what you're growing. And so if it's a garden, you want to share if it's fruit trees or things like that. And then it actually shows you a great method to get a statistically representative sample of whatever you're sampling. It's good practice to test your soil about every 5 years. So you also kind of want to test your soil around the same time of the year. So that's why it's nice to do it in the fall when you're kind of winding down from a busy season of gardening. Test it, and in about 3 to 5 years, test it again to see how it's doing. I'm going to share with you why that's important. Many times we look at our pH in Indiana. I was saying that we're very high alkalinity. We live on a lot of limestone. Now, that's different in all parts of the country. Not everyone is the same. In fact, in northern Indiana, their acidity ranges are lower and they can grow blueberries. We can't grow blueberries well here because we're usually around 7.5 in central Indiana. What's interesting about plants is it just depends what they like the most, but they like around our garden plants that we grow for veg really likes around 7, which is the neutral pH. And when you're right in the neutral pH range, you notice that it shows what the plants can take up. They can take up nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, calcium, magnesium. Those are the big minerals that are very important. And then iron is a micro mineral, manganese, boron. But do you notice how iron, as the pH goes up, the plant is not able to take up as much. So what would maybe be a symptom of a plant that's living in too high of pH, 7.5? Does anybody know what it would look like if there's not much iron getting up into the plant? Can you put it in the chat and let me know if you have an idea what your plant might look like? And so basically, when plants, no matter what their pH is, they definitely need to have a proper pH in order to take up nutrients. So if they are too high and they're not able to take up iron, they're going to start looking kind of yellowish. Yes, Heather got it, yellow leaves. So they start looking kind of chlorosis is the word for it. And so they'll start, because they just can't, no matter how much iron you add onto your soil, if the pH is not correct or balanced, they cannot take those nutrients up. And so that's why it's so important to find out your pH with a soil test. And so because you may find out that you may be not balanced. So for instance, this person is a farmer. It's a non-graphical soil result, so it's kind of complicated. But what I notice here, phosphorus, it's VH means very high, and it's not even very high. Sometimes phosphorus can be much higher. But this person has been putting compost on the soil because they thought it was good. It was manure-based compost. They thought it was good. Just because something's good doesn't mean more makes it better. So that's why before you add amendments or supplements to your soil, you should just do a soil test to see where you're at. Because if you continuously add manure-based composts, you can accidentally cause your pH to go up as well. That soil pH of 7.7 is even higher than what's usually around here because that person thought manure-based compost more was better. So it's just a good practice to know where you're starting and kind of before you start adding too much to your soil. Here's a vegetable garden of a homeowner, and it has more graphical colors and it's easier to read with the bar charts. But does anyone see right here the soil pH? 7.4. What's really helpful for the homeowners is the agronomist at these places will tell you down at the bottom that soil pH is high. You may be having troubles growing your vegetables because vegetables, the types we grow, usually love to be right in the middle at 7. So they're suggesting, they give a suggestion of applying and till in 10 pounds of sulfur per 1,000 square feet. When you have a high pH, that sulfur will lower it down. It's very slow. It won't be fast, but they're giving you a max. You never want to put too much sulfur down. It can burn your plants and it can't get incorporated in the soil in time. And so you have to follow the recommendations, and it may take a few years to get your pH back where it should be. So it's good to get a soil test just to see where you're at. Soil test is just one indicator of a soil health. You can use your eyes, your nose, you can use your hands to see how your soil feels. And even when you're looking at your soil, remember when you take like samples, you should be able to see earthworms. So here's a neat little graph from one of those SARE publications I was sharing with you that talks about indicators of good soil health. It basically says earthworms. Do you have like 10 in the top foot of the soil? Wow, that's a pretty good soil health indicator. Maybe 2 to 10, maybe you just have a medium. So it's just kind of starts getting you to see how your soil can improve over time. It's going to vary where you're at, and it could even vary in your yard in certain places, depending on if there's been erosion. There's also the color of the organic matter. What kind of compaction you have. You can have one of those neat little flags that they use when they're checking for utility lines. You could practice and put one of those down, and you can see how far you can put that down to know how compacted your soil is or where it could be compacted. So there's a lot of different soil health indicators we can use our eyes, nose, and hands just to even look at. And it's neat to keep that in like a little journal so you can see if you're improving your soil health over time. Here's others. Does your soil erode after a heavy rainfall? If you're getting major gullies, then you know that there's an issue with your runoff. If you don't have any gullies and you see clear runoff coming into your ditches or streams wherever you live, then you know that that soil is actually holding the moisture and is not eroding and it's able to hold more moisture. In fact, that's the next one, water holding capacity. Soil that can hold water is based a lot on the organic matter that's in the soil. But again, more does not equal better. It just depends on what that soil can handle with the organic matter. But that holds a lot of water, and it makes your garden more resilient to droughts, which we had here in Indiana in June. And I know, unfortunately, out in the West, they're having droughts, but having more of that organic matter makes your garden more resilient. And then again, pH, just like I was saying, proper pH for the crop. Now, if you are having poor soil, it's hard to correct. So hopefully, as you build your soil health, your pH will become more balanced for the proper crop. Another really fun, easy way to see what your health of your soil is looking like is called a soil slump test. And it's basically taking a small tea strainer and a little cup. Then you just take regular water. You go get a sample of soil. Right here, this person is looking at a soil in a garden that has had a little bit of tillage. And then they actually went out and checked a place where the farm field hadn't been tilled for 20 years or more, because they decided to go no-till in their farm field. And so she basically held that in the water for 45 seconds, and then you put it on a paper plate. And then you can see how the soil aggregates, which is basically all those organisms we can't see with our eyes, but that's what holds the soil together. We see how they're holding that soil and what kind of health that soil is having and holding itself together. So this one on the left was a soil that's been tilled more heavily. The soil on the right has not been tilled. What happens when there's tillage, it hurts the microorganisms that hold the soil together, and it especially hurts those mycorrhizae fungus that are kind of like sticky substances that feed the bacteria. And it's a huge symbiotic relationship that people are still studying today. But this is a very easy test to kind of see what your soil is doing and how it's holding itself together, and it can improve over time. It's called a soil slump test. So some information from that SARE book that I love to read about building soil health is soil ecology and balance. It does depend on our management. We can create healthy soil with our management practices. So here's some good management practices for building healthy soil, which starts in the fall. Low disturbance practices that reduce soil compaction. So for instance, if you don't have to walk on your garden, try not to. Try not to put heavy equipment on your garden. Direct seeding is a great way, but you don't have to. But permanent planting, stuff with a lot of roots that stays over winter, is really good for your soil. I say putting your garden to bed, but your soil microbes are still awake even in the winter. They're just slower, but they're still alive. Cover cropping is also a wonderful way to build soil biology, because the more things you're growing on the top of the soil, the more bacteria and more microbiology that you're growing underneath the soil. A good way to make balance is having crop rotation, having that organic matter, keeping your soil covered, and watching what you're putting on it with manure and compost, testing to make sure you're not putting too much, and watching your irrigation, and making sure you kind of like keep that mulch on to hold that soil moisture in, and then maybe you won't have to use as much water. Here's some management practices in a negative way that can influence soil ecology. If you have high disturbance, high tillage, if you're using too much sterilization, these kinds of things can hurt the soil biology. Even they say fumigants, herbicides, fungicides, and insecticides can hurt your soil biology. So, and monoculture and overgrazing. So these are just information from the SARE book that I love. Like I said, it's free online. What's happening in Indiana, and I don't know if other people are doing this in other states, but reach out to your soil water conservation districts and ask if there is any kind of new urban soil health work groups. In Indiana, we have an NRCS grant that people are going out to small holdings, small farmers, backyard growers, and they will help them check their soil and talk to them and give them assistance. A lot like the NRCS does for large farms and has always done for large farms. They want you to know that they're helping small farms too, because soil health is important for all of us. So basically their core principles is minimizing disturbance, maximizing soil cover, maximizing biodiversity, and providing continuous living roots. So Donna's asking, I hope you'll go over exactly how to tell if you use too much compost manure. You need to do a soil test. See if you have too much phosphorus and see what your pH is. That's how you know. And usually when you use manure-based products, you don't want to put too much. You just put like about a 1/2 inch all the way around on top of your garden, not too much. It's good that you're checking pH. So if you're checking pH and it's staying neutral and it's not going up, then you're probably not putting too much. That's good. Yep. So it just depends on how much you're putting. Some people feel like more is better. So don't be afraid to use compost and manure, but just know that more does not mean better. So some ways you can actually make your own compost. It is a great organic matter source if you know where your stuff's coming from. I will share where to find SARE grants and information. Yep, I will do that, Jean. And make sure that you want to put the right carbon to nitrogen. Has anyone ever had a whole big pile of green grass trimmings and had it in your pile in your yard? Remember what happens? It smells so bad because that's all nitrogen. So you want to have carbon in there too, which is the brown material. Like maybe even some of your cardboard that you order online, or if you have a box, brown material will make it more balanced. And you always want to kind of have that balance so it doesn't smell weird. You might want to look at a composting thermometer to see if you get it hot enough if you have a weed seed problem. It's best to keep weed seeds out, but if you need to maybe have a few weed seeds in there, you want to make sure it's getting to a high temperature to kill those. And just like I said earlier, add only a 1/2 to 1 inch total compost layer per year. You don't even have to till it in. If you put it on in the fall, it will be incorporated by the spring, because like I said, the soil bacteria are doing things, the microbiology are doing things, they're just slower. So giving them time over the winter to incorporate those nutrients is a good thing. And so now's the time to start getting your garden ready for the spring by using that compost. Another great compost is vermicompost. That's actually made from a type of earthworm called a red wiggler. Lots of times people are having these as commercial products. I have a farmer here in Indiana that just started doing this for a living. And basically these little guys are different than the night crawlers because they can be in small places. You'll find them lots of times in your compost pile. You can actually buy them if you wanted to and have a little compost place in your house. This is like a little bin that you could just show people, hey, I'm using my old scraps of banana peels and I'm using my coffee grounds. And then you can actually have some vermicompost. Now, you're never going to get a lot of compost like you would outside in something small like this, but vermicompost, a little goes a long way. And in fact, they're doing research on looking at compost versus vermicompost. And vermicompost just has a low carbon nitrogen ratio, but lots of times it has more microbes compared to compost. So you don't have to use very much. And lots of times people use it for starting plants or making a tea with the vermicompost. There's so many different options. And they're doing research. This is a meta-analysis of seeing how vermicompost is with different plants. Like many times they found that sometimes using vermicompost helps some diseases and pests of certain plants. So for instance, the ground nut up here sounds like they deal with an aphid, but the vermicompost helped to lower it. So they basically had a control with no vermicompost and then had the vermicompost, and vermicompost lowered it. They don't know why. I'm just sharing the research. That it's confusing because biology is a lot of variables, But I think it's interesting that even damping off of tomatoes was lowered with vermicompost. So it's just cool research going on out there, and just shows compost, there's a lot to learn. Now, here's my special interest, leaf compost or leaf litter. There's a research going on at Purdue, and Lori Hoagland's doing work. She's a microecologist of the soil. And she actually is working with some farmers, and they basically got a lot of leaves from their local municipal source, because lots of times leaves in municipal areas, people don't have room for their leaves. So the city picks them up and they don't know what to do with them. And these people, the farmers said, hey, you can bring it to my place for free. Well, the problem is this chain right here is an example. You will get trash when that happens, because people accidentally drop things in their leaves, or maybe the leaves were on the road. So you could accidentally get trash. It could have problems with any kind of, you might want to test it. You just basically need to know where it's coming from. But so they did this research at a farm, and they basically had to turn it a couple times, and they wanted to see how much their garden plants benefited from this leaf compost. It's still an ongoing research. But what's cool is leaf compost is a great carbon source, which feeds the bacteria and all the microbes in the soil, but they have low phosphorus levels. So if you get your soil test and you have high phosphorus, but you still want to have some sort of organic matter, you can then choose to try to get some leaf compost. And because just like I said before, manure-based compost can make higher phosphorus levels. And how many people have heard about the hypoxia issue down the Gulf of Mexico, where the fish basically have no oxygen? Part of that whole issue is phosphorus that gets run off into our rivers that causes problems for the fish oxygen and downstream. So if we have too much phosphorus in our soil, and we have runoff and too much erosion, it can cause problems downstream. And that's why it's important to not have too high of phosphorus levels. It's all connected. So let's look at what's happened when they use these leaf compost. This is my master gardener, actually, and she was sharing with me that yes, leaves can also be used as mulch, yes. But it kind of depends. I'll share that with you in a second. This master gardener, she actually uses a mower to make her leaves smaller. And this leaf compost pile was there probably like a year. So I'm going to show you when she's touching it, it almost looks like soil, but it was all leaves.
That's dirt. Really nice.
So it's not actually dirt. She just says it's dirt, but it was actually just that leaf compost that looks like soil, really. It breaks down so well. So someone asked, can leaves be used as mulch? It depends on what you're mulching. It depends on how thick you're mulching. You'd want to be careful if you're using oak leaves. Sometimes they have a lot of high tannins. So it kind of depends on what you're using it for. So just maybe ask your extension agent. Also, anytime, don't use black walnut leaves. You may already know this, but it has a type of phytotoxin called juglans that keeps plants from growing around it. But what can happen, especially with tomatoes, if you have a black walnut within 20 feet of your tomatoes will look wilty and you'll wonder what's happening. And it's because of that phytotoxin that the tomatoes are especially sensitive to. So if you use any kind of black walnut leaves, don't put them, you just can't use that in gardens. So I want to show you what happens when they use their leaf compost on some early transplants. So on the left, there's no leaf compost used, and on the right, they use leaf compost. And this is in tomatoes at week 2, and you can just see the difference in vigor. The vigor ratings were higher in the tomatoes on the right, and they were the ones with the leaf compost. Then they showed mature tomato plants at week 9, no leaf compost on the left and leaf compost on the right. So it just shows how that increased microbial activity from that leaf compost is adding something that the plants like. So it's going to depend if you have high phosphorus. When you do that soil test, you, like I said, it's very serious to have high phosphorus, and you can use some cover crops to maybe utilize some of that phosphorus. It kind of depends on what you're dealing with your soil. And this is all coming from that soil health book from SARE, which I will share with you here in a little bit. But it just kind of depends on what issues you're dealing with your soil, what kind of remedies you can use. They actually figured out between 2019 and 2020 what their amounts of fruit were compared to if they didn't use leaf compost or if they did. And these are types of tomatoes: Wisconsin 55 and Carbonaro near Corbin. I can never say this. Corbarino is another type of tomato they grew. 88% increase in good fruits when they use the leaf compost, and it increased 56% weight of good fruits. And with Corbinero, they had 71% number of good fruits increase and 76% weight. And they didn't say why the weight increased, but it seems like they also did mention that it was holding more moisture in the soil. So maybe it was because they had better moisture resiliency, but they do share in the next part that they need to do more research. This was this gentleman's thesis for his master's. He said that the soil organic matter, which is SOM, can retain water up to 90% of its weight. So they're talking about that water holding capacity of the mulch, which you're putting on your soil in the winter. Lots of times in the winter, it can be very dehydrating to plants. So keeping their soil covered, keeping the soil covered holds in their moisture, and they're still living under there and they need moisture. And lots of times that wind, that cold wind, can really make them dehydrated. So having that soil organic moist material keeps the soil moist and keeps that life happening. They still need to do research, they say, because they're just trying to figure out how to safeguard against erosion and how to increase that water holding capacity. Because our climate issues, it's important to keep that water in the soil. So now we're going to talk about are the animals that we see in the soil, like the insects and things like that. When I'm a beekeeper, a honey beekeeper, and when I learned that honeybees are not native to our states, I got really sad, and I guess I always thought I was helping the bees. But we need to think about our native bee population. Honeybees are a livestock. They are almost like small cows that we have to take care of as farmers so that we can get their products of the hive. They make a lot of products of the hive. They make great propolis. They make wax that we use for candles and things like that. They also make honey, and they also make a lot more bees, but they take a lot of management, and they are livestock, and they are not native to our states, and they can be a competitor of food to our native bees. Native bees, unlike honeybees have a hierarchy of social structure: the queen, the drone, and the worker. Our native bees many times are solitary, and they lots of times need specific food to live, whereas honeybees are generalist eaters. And so because honeybees are generalist eaters, if we don't have enough habitat for our native bees and our honeybees, the native bees may be pushed out because of the honeybees can eat almost anything. So that's how we can hopefully grow our habitats and while building our soil, and hopefully have more food available for our native bees. So another thing that we've always heard is honeybees are great pollinators. Notice on the left, this is a honeybee. She has her pollen basket full, and she's very efficient. See how clean she is? You can barely see any pollen on her hair. Notice on the right, a little bumblebee. She's out there getting some pollen, and notice she's got pollen all over her because she's not necessarily trying to be as super efficient. Like I said, the honeybees are a livestock. They've been bred to be super efficient. And on the right is one of our native bees. just going about her business, living her life, drinking the nectar. But which one is the superior pollinator? The one on the right is doing the most pollinating. However, if you're looking at specific numbers, of course, a honeybee hive is going to have hundreds of thousands of bees sometimes. So you can move honeybee hives. Again, it's a livestock. And the little bee on the right, she's going to probably only go 300 yards away from where she has emerged when she was hatched from an egg. So the superior pollinator, it's relative, I know, but the point is we need to think about our native bees and not just our honeybees. So, and I'm sure it sounds like many of you already are thinking about that. And research is being done on those native bees. And we're even finding more native bees more and more because lots of times they're very specialized. Another cool pollinator that I think is very interesting and very connected to soil health is, we call them different things in different parts of the country. Right here in the blue, people usually call them fireflies. In the red, it's interchangeable, like between lightning bug or fireflies. And on the left, they're usually called lightning bugs. But of course, it depends on where you grew up and what your culture is. But this little guy over here could be called a firefly or a lightning bug. What I think is so cool is their larvae live like grubs in the ground under leaf matter because they need to stay moist, and they're called glowworms. And if you could see them in the dark, they actually glow. But if you have any kind of, lots of times in Indiana, there's a beetle called Japanese beetle, and people don't like those, and they use grub begone stuff on their yard. Any grub begone that you might use on your yard will actually kill these little glowworms. These little lightning bugs research has been done, and there are lots of different species. They flash at different times. And there's a lady who actually has done research and written a book called Fireflies, Glowworms, and Lightning Bugs. Her name's Lynn Faust. And she talks about all the different types of lightning bug flashes. And she actually started doing this research after she was a master naturalist, and she was in Tennessee. And her grandma up on the hills of Tennessee, she had some lightning bugs that flashed a certain way. And when this lady became a master naturalist, she was super interested in fireflies, and she ended up doing some research. And there was a person doing research out in Thailand, and he only thought that there's only these cool lightning bugs out in the eastern part of the world. And she was like, well, I had that at my grandma's house. So because of that, she's written an entire book, and this is like her career now. But people are doing more research about lightning bugs, and soil health is extremely important to keep them alive, and soil cover and habitat, because if they have any kind of habitat disturbance, they don't come back if they're a certain specific type of species. So it's really a cool book to read. So pollinators in the fall and winter, they need the same things to survive as soil health needs to be healthy. They need less disturbance and compaction. A good way to manage some of your pollinator habitats is leave some areas of bare soil, because those bumblebees or like some other specific ground dwelling bees live in the ground, and they kind of need not to be having too much mulch over them so they can get to that bare soil. So leave a few places, leave that leaf litter. Also, you've probably heard leaving perennial stems. Stems are where a lot of leaf cutter bees and other types of native bees live over the winter. They lay eggs in the stem, and you won't be able to see them. They're so small. And just leave those, and they will come out, and they can even come out as late as the summer. So it's okay. You can cut it if you want it to be pretty, but try not to cut it down all the way. And Heather Holmes actually talks about pollinators of native plants. I would suggest any of Heather Holmes' books. She's amazing. And also check out if you have a weed wrangle person or there's a lot of weed wrangles throughout the whole nation. They're all about taking care of invasive species. Find out in your state if there's support, technical support that can help you get rid of the invasive species. And what happens when you get rid of invasives is those native plants that may still be in the soil will come back. The seed bank is still there, but they're being outcompeted by the invasives. So find out what you have in your area. We had a property survey person in our area that was part of the NRCS. It's again, Natural Resource Conservation Services, and they're in every state. Find out if there's invasive species help for you to learn how you can control your invasive species. Here's a picture Heather Holmes has on one of her websites. It's a little leaf cutter bee coming out of a pithy stem, which is a perennial. Usually perennial stems have pithy interiors. So she's chewed out the interior. She's laying her eggs that will come out eventually in the summer. So that's where they live. Those little native bees, like I said, sometimes they don't even fly 300 yards away from where they come out. So they need a place to live and to have their next generation. Some resources that you'll have hopefully in your state too is your local extension office, your local soil water conservation district, your local soil testing center. They have agronomists, which are the soil specialists that can talk to you about all kinds of questions. Many times they can even do compost testing for you. They can even do mulch testing just to see if it's healthy. And they can also, if it's a specialty place, they can find out if there's lead, if you're in a contaminated area, to find out if you can grow vegetables safely. There's a lot of podcasts. I'm sure you guys know about this. A national website about organic and also growing things is ATRA. It's really great. eOrganic is also a good website for lots of information. The NCR SARE website that I shared here, there's free books and resources. The Hidden Half of Nature, The Microbial Roots of Life and Health. That was a good book I liked, so I wanted to share that. So I'm going to, if it's okay with Heather, I'm going to ask you guys if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself and then sharing what you learned, if you learned anything about these learning objectives. So let's talk about, did you learn anything new about soil as a living thing? Anybody learn anything different or shocking, or maybe you knew it all? Share what you thought about it.
Do you want us to speak?
Yes, please. I would love it.
I learned about the lightning bugs. I did not realize that they were actually considered a pollinator.
Yep, they sure are. And they pollinate a lot at night. So that's kind of still, people are still learning about that. Yep.
Yep.
Awesome. I'm glad you learned about that. Thanks, Deanna, for sharing. What about, did anybody learn anything else about like some healthy indicators of a healthy soil? Anything new or weird about that?
I do need to send the soil test in. I've been amending, and I'm amending in the dark.
It's okay. It happens. No stress. Yeah. And then now you'll know where your baseline is and see if it's all good. Hopefully it probably will be. The soil is pretty resilient, thankfully. Someone just said in chat, I have background noise, so she can't unmute, but the lightning bugs and glowworms, she liked that, learning about that. I'm glad.
When there was a bullet point about burns, and burns not necessarily being a good thing, you're talking about more about the surface of a vegetable garden or that type of production, not about a pollinator field or prairie, right?
Exactly. Right.
Okay.
Someone said they learned more about bees. That's good. What about, did you learn about different types of composting? What'd you think about that?
I didn't realize how beneficial leaf composting was. I can't wait to try that.
Good. I hope you do. Good.
I'm a leaf thief.
Are you? To
Yes.
be honest, if you share with your friends that you'll take their leaves, they're very nice lots of times to share.
Yeah. We took some hog wire and made some big bins on the back of the property. And I'd forgotten that I've got a thermometer. I need to get that thermometer out and go check and make sure I've got, with all this drought, I don't know if they've got enough water in them.
Yeah. That's good to check it, because it will become compost faster with better moisture.
Yeah.
Someone asked how invasive jumping worm affects soil health. That's a serious issue. Definitely, if you see an invasive jumping worm, I think we're still contacting our DNR, our local DNR agents in our states, which is Department of Natural Resources, many times they're the ones that watch for invasive species and help to control those. So if you ever see those, make sure you're contacting your local DNR. They are trying to keep those out. And Diane, I haven't done the research to know how they affect soil health. I'm not sure. Someone said that they're in the area that is taking care of honeybees, and good to hear about the natives. Good. Yes, so native plants will help the honeybees, but hopefully it will also mostly help our native bees, because we need to help our native bees.
Lais, can you talk more about mulching for over the winter? I know a lot of us mulch during the growing season to keep the weeds down, but what kinds of things should we do or leave on the ground just to help for over winter?
Good question. So unless you're dealing with some major weeds, I even sometimes cut and leave it. I'm not a purist. I don't thankfully have to live in a neighborhood where I have to be totally clean looking. So I live in the country. So it's going to depend where you're at. If you need to have things neat, you probably want to buy hardwood mulch, but that will still be good. And you can have your front yard HOA pretty. And in the backyard, you could actually grow plants. Like I grow, it's not a native, but I grow mulching plants. It's comfrey, but it's not a native. But I basically just chop and drop that. And it really feeds my plants. Yes, I also do chip. Karen's saying she chips and drops, which I think you mean chop and drop. I do the exact same thing. But it's because I'm also cheap. I don't want to go pay a lot of money for mulch. So, you know what I mean? So even if you have branches and you're able to do it, I kind of cut my branches up and I'll put them around plants. That's still a mulch. So it just depends kind of what your philosophy is, how neat you need to be, and where you live. Donna has a question.
Hi, I was just wondering, are you going to go over cover crops at all?
You know, I kind of went over like a basic, like I did say you could cover things, but I didn't go detail. It's so much. But Donna, if you do have that urban soil health initiative, or maybe your NRCS, sometimes they will have some free cover crops. In our state, they have they've been giving away oats. So oats are a great beginner cover crop because, so basically right after, depending on how you guys grow your garden, if you're done around October, take some oat seeds, throw them out onto your ground. They will come up, but what's awesome is they will die in the first hard frost. So keep them there. They're going to be brown. Just kind of let them be a living mulch. They're going to be a dead mulch, but then next year, kind of like plant in them and they'll start to decompose. Donna, that is a good point. There are great cover crops. There's just so much to choose from, and it kind of depends on your goals, you know, and hopefully you have help in your state and your certain geography that hopefully can give you that support, that technical support.
What kind of oats?
Just regular oats. They're just called oats. Yeah, they're just seeds.
I have a kale patch that is pretty done at the moment. Can I put oats there now?
You should be able to in August. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. And, you know, even sometimes, like personally, when you get like, if you can find oats that aren't cracked, you know, even in your grocery store, you can plant those. It depends, you know, they're whole oats. So,
Right.
Yep.
Right. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. Very good question. Melissa asks, is straw from a goat pen good to put on a garden instead of in a compost pile? I borrow goats, and the usual pen material used is wood chips that I compost in a pile, but I can switch out to straw. So what's awesome about goat manure as well as rabbit manure, it's a cold manure and you don't actually have to compost it. But if you're trying to be food safe, that's totally different. Obviously you want to compost it to be food safe. So it kind of depends on what you're growing. So straw or the wood chips work fine, Melissa. Lots of time. It just depends on what's more available to you. They're both great brown material. If you're growing a vegetable that you're selling or eating, it's best to not put it directly onto the garden. You're composting, which is wise. I was, again, kind of lazy and I would just put it on my garden, but it was usually not veg. Someone asked, so do you not recommend rototilling? We have a new garden with clay soil and we thought we should till to break up the large clay lumps. We did mix in manure late winter, but have not tested it. I will definitely do that. So this is actually tilling, I feel like, is a major family discussion, and I would never get between a family and their thoughts about tilling. So it's going to be, this is actually a conversation you need to have. But what's interesting is looking at those slump tests. And healthy soil does better when it's no-tilled. Those are research-based things, but it's going, obviously, I want you to have a happy life. And sometimes people do things because they've just always done them. So it's something to talk about and to maybe look at the research and maybe have a plot of no-till, maybe have a plot of till, and kind of maybe do the slump test and see what happens over time, you know, just so that actually can be a little bit of a stressful conversation. But so I wouldn't want, I can't tell you what to do because I love private land and people can do what they want. But it is healthy to not till soil. Yes. USDA regions, because, you know, we all have different ways of growing things. And so it's our growing regions basically. And so they're kind of as similar as possible. So on the NCR northcentral.sare.org, you could, I could share my resources, Heather, with you if you don't mind sharing with the people that registered. Okay, cool. I will do that. I can send you the whole PowerPoint if you want.
Yes, please.
Okay. So they have grants also. They're having Farmer Rancher grant come out this August and it'll be due in December. So they do have rolling grants that are competitive. And what's cool is you can go to these project reports. It's all based on what farmers want. It's applied research. It's not theoretical research. It's like what a problem is and how it can be fixed. You can check the database all the way back to 1988 to see what has been funded for SARE research. And it's really encouraging to see some of the research and what people are learning. And you can see what your special interest is. If you like growing certain pollinator plants or veg or even row crops, you can search that way. The resources and learning is what I love. And this is where you can find all the free books. So you could even look here. So I'm just going to look at soil. And there's all kinds of, looks like they even have videos because people, when they do these SARE grants, they make deliverables and they share information. And so there's all kinds of, I didn't even know there's going to be all this. I was just going to look for the book, but let's see. Soil health. Building soil health is what it's called. Building soil.
And I will include a URL to this site in a follow-up email that I'll send. In that email, I'll also have the link to the YouTube video once we get that up.
Thank you so much. I'm having troubles finding it. So let me see. It's right here. Here it is. Building soils for better crops. So you can just see the PDF. So you open it up to PDF. And I don't know what you guys feel about PDFs, but I love it because you can do Control F. So Control F, and we could look up cover crops, just like Donna brought up, cover crops. So there's going to be like 843 of those. So they'll talk, it's just all kinds of information about building soil health, and it's free. James. Oh, okay. Oh, I see. He's going to stop the background noise. I see what he said.
Okay, I'm sorry. So we're a vegetable farm and we've still got like tomatoes and peppers. We still have everything going. But we are interested in doing a cover crop. Is there, I know we're supposed to get cover crops in the ground like now over the, I don't know, within the next month, I suppose. And we bought a cover crop mix that has stuff that's going to be winter killed and stuff that we're going to have to kill off in the spring. Is there I'm just a little concerned about starting some of that cover crop because it's going to grow and it's going to like block the peppers, going to block the kale, block our like fall beans and spinach. Is there any advice for things that we shouldn't mix with our current crops?
That's a great question. I would definitely reach out to, I know you're in Indiana, James, because I know where you live. I would reach out to your soil working group, the NRCS, because this is what they do. I mean, literally, they're helping urban growers and small producers just for that question. And I'm not well versed in all the different cover crops because there's so many. Like you said, you probably have a 20 mix, or you have a mix. So, if you don't know their information, I'll connect you with them.
I do have it. Thank you.
Oh, good. Definitely reach out to them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Heather, for having me. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Thank you, Lais. It was great. I knew it would be great. You're so knowledgeable and personable. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Make all that, some of that soil talk can get dry, but not from you. So we're getting lots of thank yous from people online. And as I said, we will send out the recording. And thank you all for being here. We hope to see you at another program soon. And thank you again, Lais.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Have a great day.